She wanted to stop in before I start this question and answer period. She has a million different outfits. She wears a hood too for everyone that makes fun of me wearing a hood. But before I get into this live Q&A, I'm going to give the daily news. According to the Wrestling Observer, the issue between this Drew Gulak and the WWE is he wanted more money. They're not giving any raises right now. They just fired a bunch of people. So his contract just ran out. So he wasn't fired or anything. His contract just ran out. He could still technically possibly re-sign. WWE is likely to have their most lucrative year ever, despite not running any live events, because their live events weren't really profiting anyways, and they're making more money than ever for TV deals, even though the ratings for their flagship shows are only in the 0.5s right now. According to Dave Meltzer, he believes Becky Lynch will probably still be getting her downside guarantee while pregnant. Or the other thing that could happen, if she refuses to not do appearances or anything during the time that she's going to be pregnant and with the baby, they could freeze her contract and tack that time off from her current contract onto the end of her contract, similar to what they do with people when they get injuries like Jeff Hardy. Alistair Overeem was victorious last night in UFC over Walt Harris. That was the main event. He got the TKO in that fight. Pretty impressive performance by Alistair, who got a first round TKO over Brock Lesnar a bunch of years ago. UFC recently uploaded Overeem's knockout over Brock Lesnar. I watched it a couple days ago. And finally, in UFC news, Kevin Randleman is going into the UFC Hall of Fame. So I said that I would do a Q&A live tonight because a lot of people complain that they miss my news when I usually do the fan questions. So for the people that aren't aware of it, we can do some live questions right now. Alex Legal Research says hi. Mark Tieg says Hannibal, always a pleasure. By the way, I did speak to Kevin Sullivan today, and he is doing well. He does have some weights at his house, and he told me he's deadlifting about 245 pounds right now. So he's staying fit despite this lockdown. Josh says, is Lady Yasmin ever returning to Great North Wrestling? He misses her badly. Well, it's possible. Maybe by the time this lockdown is over and things are able to get back to normal, we'll see Lady Yasmin back in the ring. She is the most popular female wrestler in the history of Great North Wrestling. Ralph Vaquero says, everyone stay safe. Alan Kesselman, thanks for hosting this. The daily updates have been informative and entertaining. You're very welcome. Chris Lee says hello. Bonner Breaker 69 says he hasn't paid taxes since 2004. Thanks for letting us know. Bob Bardovic, first question, who is the worst worker in WWE? Well, I haven't watched WWE regularly since probably 2005. So I couldn't tell you who the worst worker is in WWE because I haven't seen the talent. I'll be honest with you, and I don't mean this as an offense to this Drew Gulak guy, but I had never even heard of him until yesterday when he was in the news for his contract expiring after appearing on SmackDown. So I couldn't tell you fairly who the worst worker in WWE would be. The most overrated would be Kevin Owens, in my opinion, for sure. City of Roses 79 asks, what are my favorite albums? Well, I'll put over the Stone Cold Metal album that Steve Austin put out. back in like the late 90s because that was my introduction to hair metal, and I'm a huge hair metal fan. Let me jump to the $5 tip here from Bradley Gamble. Thank you, Bradley Gamble. Who is my favorite wrestler growing up? That'd be a tough one. I guess the first one that's popping into my head right now would be Ric Flair, but there was a bunch of them. My parents would always say it was The Undertaker, but I would say it was Ric Flair. And who's my favorite wrestler currently? I would say it's Brock Lesnar because he's legitimately tough. He has mystique about him, and he's a good amateur wrestler and fighter. So thanks again for your $5 tip, Bradley. MRF tip me $9.99. He says my baby doll interview is great. His other favorite shoot interview of mine is Larry Zbyszko. Thank you. Thank you. And I talked to Ricky Morton today too. He couldn't confirm the exact day, but I will be doing an interview with Ricky Morton next week. Thanks in part to the lovely tips from you guys, as well as the Patreon subscriptions and donations at patreon.com/the Hannibal TV that are helping fund this channel. And of course, if you join Patreon, I post the full interviews on there ad-free before they ever go in full on YouTube. And yes, I have to put ads on them on YouTube because we need revenue. Otherwise, we could never do any interviews. Chris Lee says they released episode 2 of the Undertaker documentary. Well, if they post it on Daily Motion like they did the first one, I'll do another review of it like I did for the first one. DBag0584 says hello. FM says Drew sucks. Ivan Santos, hello. Larry Gonzalez, hi. Alan Kesselman says big loss for WWE related to this Drew Gallic guy. Very plain looking guy, I must say, but I understand he was a good technician. Ethan Wilkin, have I been watching The Last Ride? I did a whole review of the first episode of The Last Ride. And as I mentioned in my Wrestling Observer review this week, Dave Meltzer pointed out that one thing that they haven't really got into yet in these Last Ride documentaries is one of the main reasons Undertaker is still wrestling is because he gets paid multi-millions of dollars for only wrestling like 2, 1, 3, 4 times a year. So he's getting paid big money to only wrestle a few times a year. He's had divorces. He's on his third wife. According to Meltzer, I don't know if it's true, but he says Undertaker has had some bad past investments. So yes, wrestling in front of 60,000 people at WrestleMania is great. Fun. As a wrestler, wrestling is fun, particularly in front of big crowds. But he's also doing it for the money. Darren Watson, where did the word blading come in? Well, blading is the process of taking a razor blade and slicing yourself with it in a professional wrestling match. So that is just a word that describes the process properly. You take a blade, either you tape it to your wrist tape, put it in your mouth. Some people, like Abdullah the Butcher, would tape it to their fingers and then just put a bit of tape over top of it. And then some people do it differently. Some people would slice themselves sideways. Some would slice up and down. And some, like Abdullah, just do like a million different cuts. Like Abdullah, for instance, will blade himself 10 or more times a match, just going like that all the time, where other people will just do one and just get it in one shot. Nasty Boys in the Hall of Fame, Mike DeFeo says, depends how much Hulk Hogan wants to go to bat for them. And I don't know how close Hogan and Brian Knobbs are. He's told me off the record that they are still close, but other people have told me that Knobbs is distant from him. Tony Smith just tipped me $10. Battle Royal scenario: you, Harley Race, Bruiser Brody, Tony Atlas, and the Mountie remains. Who wins? They're all in their prime. And I just eliminated superstar Billy Graham. Well, since I'm the only active wrestler of all those names you just put out there, I guess Tony Atlas technically still is, but he's at the end of his run. I'd have to say I would beat them all just because Harley's dead, Brody's dead. You got to promote the future of wrestling, and well, I guess I'm the one that's in the best shape right now. And I think honestly, I'm a better amateur wrestler than Harley, Brody, and Tony Atlas. The Mountie, if he didn't have a weapon like he had with Dynamite Kid, I don't know how tough he would be in hand-to-hand combat. Not saying he's not a tough guy. Brody, I think I'm more technically skilled than him, similar in strength. Harley's very tough. Wouldn't want to have a shoot fight with Harley Race, but I'll put myself over. Thanks again for the tip, Tony Smith. And Adam Albert, too, tipped me $10. Thank you to Adam Albert for that. Randy Blant, would I be able to do a shoot with the makers of Dark Side of the Ring? I do have one interview with the producers of Dark Side of the Ring on this channel talking about the Bruiser Brody episode. I have not talked to them this year because I was a little mad about how they portrayed Kevin Sullivan in the Chris Benoit episode without any proof or documentation, just letting pure hearsay out as if it's fact. But I've now realized that's Kevin's battle. If he wants to pursue that, that's his problem. But yeah, I'd interview them again. Not at the top of my list, but I would interview them again. Pete C, just a quick question. Who inspired me the most on becoming a pro wrestler? I would say Macho Man, because he was in the main event of the first WWE show I saw live. It was Macho Man against Brutus Beefcake. And by the way, the arena was packed. It was at the Ottawa Civic Center in 1989, and it was packed. And Macho Man was my first favorite. Before I saw Ric Flair in the NWA, the very first wrestling angle I ever saw was actually the Saturday night's main event where Hogan and Savage broke up. That was the very first thing I ever saw in wrestling. My mother used to be a caregiver, and I was like a 4 or 5-year-old kid at that time. And she was babysitting an older kid that, for whatever reason, he was off school during the day, and he had brought over a Saturday night main event cassette because it aired at like midnight. His parents had taped it for him, and he wanted to watch it. So the moment I actually saw that whole Mega Powers Explode episode, I was immediately hooked on wrestling. And of course, wrestling in general was very popular at that time. All the kids watched it. It was cool in the late 80s to be a fan of wrestling. I remember there was no UFC, so when you roughhoused in the playground, everyone would say, okay, I'm Macho Man, I'm Hulk Hogan. Now they probably say they're UFC fighters, but like, it was popular to know about wrestling. So that was my first taste of it through Macho Man. And as I said, later that year, it was 89, I went to my first WWE event, and then I never missed an event. After that, until after I graduated high school, I saw every single event that ever came to my town. Darius Curry just tipped me $30. Thank you very much, Darius. Do I think this COVID pandemic will finish off wrestling because these empty arenas have exposed how bad wrestling has become? WWE has forgot how to make stars, and AEW has a man, their women's champion. Actually, Impact also has a man, their women's champion. Now, as I said, I don't know if Nyla Rose has actually had the operation where I guess if there's a penis right now on her or not, she does consider herself a woman, but she was definitely born a man. I don't know if all this bisexual and transgender and gay stuff is going to help AEW get a mainstream crowd. It seems like their ratings have gone way down. They're only in the 0.2s. Before this lockdown, live attendance was going down. I think the COVID pandemic has accelerated the decline of wrestling for sure. It's accelerated the decline of TV wrestling 100%. I don't know if it's going to finish it off because WWE has a lot of assets. They're a very rich company, but I don't know if it'll ever be as popular again as it once was. Independent shows, this has also hurt. A lot of independent companies have crashed. And it's going to affect wrestling in general. Again, I've said it before, if wrestling is not popular on the TV level, it's hard to make it popular as an independent promoter / wrestler, because if it's not cool or people aren't following it on TV, they don't want to go see it live. So yes, this is definitely going to hurt wrestling. It has exposed how fake wrestling is for sure. And having Otis, who recently won the Money in the Bank, I actually respect him as a person, as a fellow amateur wrestler, but that he went to a news source after, I believe it was Sports Illustrated, and basically said it was a pleasure putting the match together with everyone, was happy they put me over and so forth. It's like, you guys are continuously breaking kayfabe. You have Drew Galloway thanking Brock Lesnar, saying what a great guy he is for putting him over. Why do we want to see this? Why do we want to see MMA now? It's because there's grudges, there's feuds, there's build-up, it's believable, and wrestling is just losing all believability. They have people evaporating in matches, people teleporting in matches. I don't know. Can I interview Trish Stratus? Maybe. Neutral 69 asked me that. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but she wouldn't be an easy one to get. And again, thank you for the views to the people that are trying to insult me on here. You're still giving me views. I appreciate it. I actually looked at my views for the past 30 days before I started this, and I have double the views that Ring of Honor has had in the past 30 days as one person. Ring of Honor is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting, and they only had half the views that I had this month with all of the footage they own, all of those famous wrestlers they have under contract, all of the money they have to throw around. I doubled their viewership. Theirs is like just over 5 million. Mine is just over 10 million the past 30 days. Raw and SmackDown, more often than not, have under 2 million viewers per episode this month. So if you add up all the viewers of Raw for this month, the past 30 days, more people watched Hannibal TV than watched Raw, for instance, the past 30 days. So I thank all of you guys for that. I really appreciate it. Hernandez is asking me, WWE was doing horrible with fans. Now without fans, they're rotting. I agree. Everyone likes to blame this on the lockdown, but the downfall was happening before. WWE canceled more live events than in the company's entire history in 2019. So although, yes, they're making more money than ever because of their TV deals, if they keep getting 0.5 and lower ratings, chances are whenever these TV deals expire, they're not going to have big money TV deals like this again. Michael B tipped me $5. Thank you, Michael B. What do I do if Haku stole my dog? Old WWE angle where the Islanders stole the Bulldog's dog. Well, I guess, I think everyone knows from watching my past altercations with Haku, I'm not afraid of Haku. But I think my dog is a little smarter than Matilda. Poodle, or maybe it was, no, it was Matilda. Poodles are smarter than bulldogs, and she's very fast. I don't think Haku could catch her these days. His knees aren't as strong as they used to be. Tim Travel Theory says interview Ole Anderson. Roberto DeMario says Bastion Booger for the Hall of Fame. That would be, he's as deserving as some of the people in there. Bossman 525, best era of wrestling. I would say like 1980s was the best era by far. As far as there were some amazing matches, the characters were great, and the crowds were selling out everywhere. And there were so many places to work if you were a wrestler. Jamie Hollinger, you're the one of the only interesting commentators on YouTube for pro wrestling. Thank you. Expendable Patriot, The Fiend should beat Strowman. The Fiend trying to get Otis's head would be entertaining. I think The Fiend is more over than Strowman. And as a person, I have more respect for Bray Wyatt than I do Braun Strowman, so I'll second that. And unlike Kevin Owens, who just wrestles in T-shirts and shorts, at least The Fiend has like a gimmick where he actually looks like a monster, even though he's overweight. But it looks like The Fiend actually does work out. He's got some muscle on him, and he's also a former amateur wrestler, so he's not just a fake guy walking around saying that he's a fighter when he's never been in a real fight in his life like Kevin Owens. Bluto Selowski says WWE looks like a bunch of ballet dancers. True. A lot of people say it looks like a bunch of gymnasts or ballet dancers. Double S says congrats on having more subscribers than Jim Cornette, The Wrestling Observer, and Bruce Pritchard YouTube channels. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'll get into some more of your questions. Ralph Caro, you're doing a good job as always. People that do well always have haters. Yes, I know. And as I said, thank you, haters, for giving me the views. I appreciate it. There are some really crazy people that message me and threaten me. I find that funny, but other than a few times when I've been a wrestler, where I've been attacked by fans, the only feedback I get from people when I go to conventions or when I'm at Great North Wrestling events meeting fans is positive. But whether you like me or not, I don't care. I was a heel most of my career. Somebody asked me if I was ever a babyface, and yes, I was a babyface from about 2011 to pretty much 2017. And I was a pretty good babyface, but I'm a more natural heel. McEvoy Productions wants a shout out. Ronan Hughes, any plans for more old school MMA shoots? I am supposed to do a Skype shoot interview with Dan Severin next week. Butterbean, I'm supposed to do soon for an interview. I love the old school MMA fighters. Yes, there's going to be more. Yes, this channel is going to cover more and more MMA and boxing as time goes on. As people have said on here, wrestling is getting less popular. So we got to get into other topics to stay relevant. Maybe that's one of the reasons why my channel is doing better than the Ring of Honors, the MLWs, the New Japans, the NWAs, because I'm covering stuff other than wrestling. Now, I don't have anything against Ring of Honor, by the way, personally, or MLW or New Japan. I actually like MLW, but MLW is getting like 2 million views a month right now, compared to over 10 million for me. Mark Anthony tipped me $10. Mark Anthony Given. Hashtag Mark Anthony Given for the third time. Thank you for the $20 tip. As I said, I invest all of these. I'm interviewing Ricky Morton next week. I've reached out to Medusa. Haven't heard back from her yet, but I'm working on it. Frank Kirsch says he loves my interviews. Keep them coming. Great job. Pete C., I remember Backyard Wrestling when me and my friends did it in the late 80s. It was so fun on a big crash mat. I did backyard wrestling too, and we finally had to stop when we had like 80 fans because I would actually sell tickets for like it was like 20. There was a hill in my backyard, so if you were on top of the hill, it's like 25 cents. If you were on the bottom of the hill, it was like ringside. It was like 50 cents, and then front row was like $1. And at one point, we had like 80 fans, and they got really loud and rowdy. That was when I was in grade 9, and then my parents said, "Okay, you can't do it anymore." I did do some like basement wrestling after that. I remember if my parents would go away and leave me alone for a weekend, we'd record like basement wrestling matches in the Attitude Era. And someone was asking me how popular wrestling was in the Attitude Era. I remember being in grade 9 and 10, wrestling was not popular. And then suddenly in grade 11 and 12, it was suddenly hugely popular. I remember playing, because there was no YouTube back then, my basement wrestling videos in the hallways at lunch. The school would let me. And like we'd have 50 people watching the TVs, and like it's just gone the other direction again now. Now MMA is considered cool and wrestling's considered lame. Hopefully wrestling will make a comeback. But I'm not going to support the products that are out there now on TV, WWE, because it sucks. I'm not going to hope that that type of product becomes popular. I hope a new product comes and becomes popular. AEW, remember everyone? When they first said they were going to come, they said they were going to bring things back to old school. I have not seen anything old school from AEW. Darius Curry tipped me $5 and says people don't tune in to see crash test dummies and stunt doubles. They want believable stories with emotion told in the ring. Well, thank you for the $5 tip, Darius. I appreciate it. And you're right. People don't want to see gymnasts. They don't want to see ballet. And they don't want to see unbelievable stuff. Like, remember another good example of the way WWE is promoting. If you remember the press conference between Tyson Fury and Braun Strowman before their Saudi Arabia match, do you guys remember how boring that was and how nothing happened? And then the press conference between Fury and Deontay Wilder for their boxing match was much, much more entertaining. Watch them back to back. Wrestling is worked. There's no excuse why it shouldn't be more entertaining. Rod Johnson just tipped me $10. Says greetings from Holland, Michigan. Thanks for the great content. He hopes that I'm able to interview Dennis Condrey one day. I'm sure I will get around to the Midnight Express. I've never met Dennis Condrey yet. Hopefully I'll run into him one day. Expos History 2 tipped me $5. Thank you very much, Expos History 2. I like the Expos, by the way. When they were around, was the closest MLB team to me. Expendable Patriots. Already read your comment. Mark Galileo. Did I interview Wendy Richter? Not yet. I would like to. The 4995 Marauder says, "What's up, bro?" Bluto Sadowski. Vince killed kayfabe. It's not just Vince. Social media, I think, is what really killed kayfabe, because social media has just destroyed kayfabe. Absolutely destroyed it. Smitty Smith, thoughts on Marco Stunt? He fits in well with that Luchasaurus and Jack Perry. I think he fits in well with that group for that gimmick. I haven't seen him wrestle lately, but I did remember that he was doing that jungle gimmick when he first started in AEW, yet he's wearing like regular amateur wrestling boots, not even pro wrestling boots. And it's like, supposedly no wrestler in AEW makes under 100 grand a year. You can't afford like jungle boots for your gimmick. That's my only takeaway from him. And obviously he's green, but I understand why they used him for that. Darren Watson, Mid-South Wrestling, gave big breaks to talent like The Undertaker. If you could go back in time, would you welcome matches with Jackie Fargo and Tojo Yamamoto? I think you're talking about Memphis Wrestling. I'm not sure if The Undertaker ever wrestled for Mid-South. He did wrestle for Jerry Jarrett in Memphis. Uh, for the right money, I would wrestle anybody. I'm a professional wrestler. So yes, I would have wrestled Jackie Fargo. Tojo Yamamoto, I would have had a great match with. We both chop really hard. Rolo 555, crash test dummy wrestlers are good to be used as jobbers and enhancement talent. Nothing more. Josh says Great North Wrestling is the only good company now. I wouldn't say that. I would say we are definitely the top one in Canada for sure, and definitely the most known worldwide company from Canada. But PCW Ultra is a good company, and I'm sure there's others that I'm not aware of in the US that are good. I've heard there's one in Washington that's really good. Defy, I think. I haven't seen Defy, but I heard that one's not bad. NGW in the Northwest, I've heard is also good. Someone says they push women a lot in TV wrestling these days. They do, but if I had to sit through a match between a woman and a man in these days, between a women's match and a men's match, I'd rather watch a women because at least it's watching attractive females, even if the wrestling's bad. Smitty Smith, would I sell for Marco's stunts? It really depends. It really depends. If AEW had me under contract and I was making 6 figures a year, it's just like a movie or an acting job. You'll do what you're told. But on an independent match, I wouldn't want to wrestle him. And like if I was getting independent wrestler pay, no, I would not sell for him. Ethan Wilkins, do I like Keith Lee? I haven't seen that much of him. He's a very spotty wrestler from what I've seen. And I don't like spotty wrestlers. As I said, my style of wrestling is very spur of the moment, which was one of the things I liked about 80s wrestling. There wasn't scripted matches for the most part, other than in a few exceptions. Haha, Gio just tipped me $4.99. When am I interviewing Lance Storm and Jerry Lynn? I will actually check in with Lance Storm. He could be a possibility, and I know him. I trained with him a bit when I lived in Calgary. Jerry Lynn, I don't know. And I said it before, I'll say it again now. Why the fuck did WWE keep Sylvain Grenier, who they just hired as a producer, and fire Lance Storm as a producer when Lance Storm has so much more experience, so much more credibility, and has never been out of the wrestling business? Sylvain Grenier was out of the wrestling business for like 8 years when they brought him back as a producer, and he was part of the concussions lawsuit. So why did they keep him and fire Lance Storm? I guess that all has to do with who Pat Patterson likes the most. Fate _ F30 says greatest single event in pro wrestling. For him, it was when Hulk Hogan turned heel. Well, as I said, my single event, the greatest event that still resonates with me is what I talked about earlier. The angle that brought me into wrestling was when Macho Man turned on Hogan on that Saturday night main event and the whole build up to WrestleMania 5. And I was speaking earlier about how dumb the evaporating wrestlers are and so forth, and like wrestlers pinning themselves in matches, wrestlers teleporting. Could you imagine any of that stuff at WrestleMania 5 when Hogan fought Macho Man? Could you imagine if like Macho Man just evaporated in the middle of the match, or if Hulk Hogan made his own pin on himself at the end of the match? Like, it just shows you how far down the drain wrestling has gone. Ronald Ryan, how would I book The Undertaker's retirement? Well, I'm very biased. and I would bring me in for it and feud him with me for his last feud. And that's a very selfish and biased answer. But as I stated in my Undertaker compilation video that is posted on this channel, I did work with him before in the ring. We practiced together and we did work well together. And I think we could have a very good feud. Oswald states says Sting to AEW. Who knows if that's going to happen? All we know is his WWE merchandising contract has run out. He's 61 years old with neck issues and spinal issues, according to reports. It's not like he's really going to give AEW a massive ratings boost at his age beyond maybe one episode. Wadcliffe Pluto says, people talk tough. Is there any current wrestlers I consider tough? Samoa Joe comes to mind. Brock Lesnar comes to mind. The guy that just debuted, his name is slipping me, on NXT. What the hell is his name? He wrestled in Impact and MLW before. He's bald. Killer Cross. He's tough. Tony Smith just tipped me $5. Me versus Patira in a cage. Who would win? That is very easy. That one is me. I've never heard of. I know Ken Patira was very strong, but very bulky. And you never see in UFC, particularly at the start, the bulkier guys never really won that much in the UFC. The best fighters are the ones that have good cardio and good movement. And of course, you have to be tough. And I don't doubt Patira is tough, but I don't think he was ever an amateur wrestler. His biggest asset would be his strength. And I remember reading in Ric Flair's book that Patira would really suffer through the cardio drills in Vern Gagne's camp because he smoked. I don't know if Patira still smokes, but I've never been a smoker. UWF was underrated. Darren Watson says Undertaker wrestled for Bill Watts as the Tower of Pain. Cool. I'm surprised Bill Watts didn't mention that in his book. I don't remember that. And Andrew Zing, do I have a favorite territory? I would Mid-South is my favorite, as well as obviously Stampede Wrestling. I try and base Great North Wrestling as much as I can off of Stampede Wrestling because I wrestle the Stampede Wrestling style. The $4.95 Marauder tipped me $4.99. Thank you, buddy, and thanks for your support. Besides Gable and Kurt Angle, Daniel Cormier, or Kale Sanderson, or any other NCAA champion interviews, I'll be honest with you. I don't know how many hits the NCAA champion interviews would get, but if I ever came across one, I would interview them. I do want to do a better interview with Dan Gable. When I did the one interview with Dan Gable, he was very generous. He gave me about 20 minutes, but I was not expecting to meet him that day or see him at all, so I was unprepared for that interview. I really would like another shot to interview Dan Gable. He's a hero of mine. Al tipped me $5, says interview Papa Shango. There is an interview with the Godfather who played Papa Shango on this channel. If you search the Hannibal TV Godfather interview, and next time I go back to Vegas, I'll stop by his club and I'll do another interview with him. We did get along well. He's a great guy. Raw Talent tipped me $20 and says favorite Salvatore Sincere match. I don't have any respect for Salvatore Sincere because for those of you that don't know, he walks around claiming that he was the Patriot in WWE now and he does the Patriot gimmick, even though that was Dale Wilkes' gimmick. So I think that's really low. That's like me pretending to be Papa Shango, going around pretending to be him. Favorite Salvatore Sincere match? I honestly can't remember a single Salvatore Sincere match, but I didn't have an issue with him other than I think Dale Wilkes had his issues over the years, but he's a good guy. And in wrestling, you should have some respect and not steal people's gimmicks. Dustin Novath says, do I have an email or a place to contact? You can reach me at greatnorthwrestling@gmail.com. I'm not the only one that answers that one, but the messages will get back to me. So if anyone wants to reach me with something private, message me there or on Twitter at Devon Hannibal, DEVON HANNIBAL. I don't run the Instagram. I have people that help with that. So for the people that write hate mail to the Instagram, I don't get it. So send the hate mail to Facebook at Devon Hannibal or Twitter at Devon Hannibal. Shannon Hutchinson II says, Jackie laugh. Van Albright, my favorite bloody match. Well, I think the bloodiest match I was ever in was the match where Abdullah the Butcher bashed a coffee pot over my head and required 64 stitches for me to close, and I almost bled to death. Other than that, the bloodiest match I've ever witnessed. I think I've honestly had some of the most bloody matches of anyone in the business, but nothing really is jumping out to mind. I've seen Abdullah the Butcher in some bloody matches on the independent circuit in Quebec before I became a wrestler. So the bloodiest matches, other than my own personal bloody matches, would have been him against nobodies on the independent circuit, where he's just as he always did, basically slaughtered them. Kibbles and Bits says, any people I interview where I felt they were just full of crap, Brutus the Barber Beefcake. For the full of crap meter, it was him. Juventud Guerrera, he was a bit full of crap too, and he also avoided a lot of questions. He would be up there with Beefcake. Robert Spartany, Stampede style is basically the dives they're all doing now. No, not at all. I can't recall any real dives from Stampede Wrestling. Stampede style is a hard-hitting, realistic style of wrestling, similar to the Japanese style. Well, there may have been some Stampede wrestlers that may have done dives. I don't think Bad News Allen ever did a dive. And my kid wrestled a gritty, hard-hitting style, as did most of the Stampede wrestlers. I don't think Leo Burke ever did a dive. I don't think Stu Hart ever did a dive. I don't think Bruce Hart ever did a dive. I don't think David Schultz ever did a dive. I don't think Abdullah the Butcher ever did a dive, to name a few of the Stampede stars. Harley Race, he never did a dive. Double S, tip me $5. Have I heard comedian Tom Segura's take on wrestling fans? I have not. I don't even know who Tom Segura is. Thank you for the $5 tip, Double S. Man, thank you for doing live even at this time. Paul Dimitro says, you're welcome. Couple more. When was the last time I wrestled in Toronto and who did I face? I'll be honest, I never actually wrestled in Toronto. I don't like Toronto. I actually hate, or I guess technically I was used by an extra in WWE in Toronto, and I had an amateur wrestling match before the show with Sheldon Benjamin. So I guess technically that was a match, and I've had a bunch of amateur wrestling matches in Toronto, but there's not really any companies I like in the Toronto area. And I don't like the city of Toronto. Toronto traffic is horrible at any time of day. You could be stuck in traffic for hours. So for independent wrestling where you're paid like $50 to $200, Toronto is a 5-hour drive for me, and that could be compounded sitting through traffic. It's not on my list. Long Duck Dong. Great name from that classic 80s movie. Tip me $5. Thank you, Long Duck Dong. Bobby Heenan said wrestling is dead. The magic has been revealed, and I concur. It's worse than watching gay performers, I say. That's Long Duck Dong's comment. I don't care what sexuality performers are personally. I just don't like to see like softcore porn in the wrestling ring. Like recently, there was a Twitter clip of Kenny Omega like humping another male wrestler, and it's like that's just a little too much for me. Um, but wrestling's not necessarily dead. When I did that angle with Terry Funk and Thunder Bay 10 years ago now, people believed that angle. And we had 3,000 fans to an independent show for the show the next day. You can make people suspend their disbelief if you do a realistic angle enough, but WWE is not doing realistic angles. They're not even trying to call themselves wrestling anymore. They're calling themselves entertainers. AEW does a lot of phony stuff with the likes of Orange Cassidy, all these people doing these slap kicks. There's nothing I hate more than the slap kicks. I've never done it. Everybody knows that secret. There's a million videos of it. So why do people slap their legs when they kick? It's just stupid. So I think it's reasons like that. Wrestling's dead. With wrestlers like Otis going in the paper to Sports Illustrated the day after he wins Money in the Bank, thanking everyone. And, oh, it's cool to put the match together. Could you imagine? I'll go back to this one more time. Hogan and Savage the next day. Hogan going in the newspaper, oh, thank you to Randy Savage. He wrote out that match. We practiced that match, and Randy put me over. Thank you so much. Hogan never would have done that. Hogan was very protective. Lex Luger told me a story that on Nitro, when the cameras went dead airtime, when he confronted Hogan on the first Nitro, he let out a little smirk, and that pissed off Hulk Hogan to the point where Hogan said, wipe that fucking smile off your face. So as much as I'm not the biggest Hogan fan as far as his continuous lies, I do respect him as a wrestler. And stuff like that shows that protecting the business can pay off. Look at all the money Hogan made. They're making huge money now, but they're not making it off of what they draw. It's actually funny how much money wrestlers make now. MRRED says WWE is garbage. Mitch Wooten says Chris Jericho interview. I'd be up for it if he was. Malafay says New Jack is running for Congress. Kevin Wynn, Otis is super lame. Richard Levram says Trump 2020. Rowan Hughes, any plans for a New Jack interview? He did send me a quote for one, and it was a lot of money he was asking for, and there's already a lot of shoot interviews of New Jack online free, so he might be a little bit out of my budget. I would like to do one with him, but during this pandemic time, the amount of money he's asking for is just out of my budget. Interview Dynamite Kid's daughter, Joshua Max says, I wouldn't be opposed to it. It's not a bad idea. Rich Rodeo says Hogan is selfish, but his daughter is that sign. I'd like to see what Brooke Hogan looks like now, and I would like to do an interview with Brooke. That would be great, actually. Brooke Hogan would be a good interview, and Linda Hogan would be a funny interview to do. I would actually love to interview either one of them. Doink the Clown, any dead wrestlers I would have liked to have interviewed. I was just talking about it on a Sirius XM radio interview I did earlier today with a guy from San Francisco. That Roddy Piper, who my dog, who you saw earlier, is named after, he would have been one guy for sure. Macho Man, Lou Thez for sure. I really would like to interview all those guys. Have I interviewed Bruce or any of the Harts? There's several interviews with Bruce Hart on this channel, including one extended one. Just look up Bruce Hart, the Hannibal TV. There's an extended interview with Diana Hart. There's interviews with Ross Hart, Ted Hart, Davey Boy Smith Jr., many people from the Hart family. Cyrus747, Mike Chioda interview. Mike Chioda, sorry, or Chioda. I believe he was a ring announcer. Yes, I would interview him, sure. Ralph Vaquero says, bring back ECW. A company that was like a cross between Stampede Wrestling and ECW is what I would make Great North Wrestling into if I had the funding for it. So keep subscribing to Patreon. When this pandemic's over, we're going to try and make it into something like that if we can get the funding. RJ, what's my top year money-wise? In wrestling, I would have to say these last few years because I'm doing better as an interviewer than I ever did as a wrestler. But as far as making money from actual pro wrestling matches, it was when I was in IWA Puerto Rico. I was supposed to be paid more when I was recruited to WWC Puerto Rico, but unfortunately, after the first, I would say once I bought my apartment in Puerto Rico, they started screwing with my pay, and they never were honest with my pay. And they never paid me my guarantee. They ended up owing me over $5,000 when I left. So IWA Puerto Rico, where they actually paid me what they said they were going to pay me, was my best for actual in-the-ring competition. As far as overall promotions and money I've made in the wrestling business, I would say 2019 was my best year because the Hannibal TV is getting more and more popular. Have I interviewed the bear that beat up Tracy Smothers? Kevin Ader says, ha ha ha. Josh Greencorn tipped me $5. Have I wrestled in Winnipeg? It's like Toronto. I've wrestled amateur in Winnipeg, just like in BC. I was also saying this earlier today on the Sirius or the XM radio podcast I did. I've wrestled in BC amateur, but not professional. So no, I only wrestled amateur in Winnipeg. CWE, who we have done interviews with, CWE wrestlers and promoters on this channel. They're the top company in Winnipeg. Ralph Vaquero says Eddie Guerrero would have been a good interview. If he was probably drinking, he probably would have been a good interview. But he doesn't seem to be like a very open guy. And if you look at, if you look at Juventud Guerrera, he was a really bad interview. Carlito, another Spanish wrestler, was a really bad interview. So I don't know if it's just a language thing or what, but I haven't had very good luck with, or Hugo Savinovich has been good interviews with me, the Spanish commentator. But overall, Spanish wrestlers have not been that great interviews. Actually, Ricky Banderas wasn't a bad one. I do have a Ricky Banderas interview on here, who I feuded with in Puerto Rico, by the way. Sally Field, did Stone Cold steal the Sandman's gimmick? A lot of people think Stone Cold stole elements of David Schultz and the Sandman. There's no doubt he took elements from their gimmicks for sure. Steve Owen, what makes Dr. Tom a doctor? I am interviewing Dr. Tom Pritchard tomorrow, by the way. I'll ask him that. There you go, Steve Owens. I'll ask him for you. Did I ever watch All-Star Wrestling growing up? Dave Show. No, I did not. Jazz Vengeance loves my work and the respect I show pro wrestling. Was curious what I think of young kids doing combat sports. I keep seeing all these videos of kids doing MMA sparring, and I don't know if it's good to be taking head trauma from that young of an age, like from being 4 or 5 years old, starting to get cracked in the head. I don't know if I'm a fan of that because I'll be honest with you, up until recent years, I wouldn't even wear headgear when I did sparring. because I didn't care and I was younger and stupider. So, yeah, I don't claim to be the brightest guy ever, but when you're young, especially a teenager, a young kid, you're not thinking about your future. I don't know if doing sports where you're taking a lot of shots to the head is the best idea, but learning jujitsu, um, doing maybe no contact or very light contact sparring is a good idea. I don't think you should be allowed to fight MMA before you're 18 or over. 100%. I don't think kids should be taking that many blows to the head. Long Duck Dong tipped me another $5. He says he's got an idea for a wrestling show called Lies from Wrestling Cloth, Exposing the Truth. Well, it would. I think that a wrestling expose show would be good. Yes, I agree with you there. I try to, not all of the interviews that I do involve truthful people, but I try to be truthful in everything I do on here. And I don't claim to be the cleanest person in the world, by the way. I've done my fair share of partying. I'm not a hardcore partier anymore. I've not always been the nicest person. I'm still not the nicest person, but I've never claimed to be the purest person, by the way. For the people on here that sometimes say that I pass myself off as, I don't. There's a whole bunch of questions. I don't know if I'm going to get through them all today because I've almost done an hour. Dave Show, what wrestler would I like to be tag team partners with? This actually, I wanted to be a tag team partners with Road Warrior Animal, but he never, like, by the time his last run in WWE was over, he didn't want to do in-ring competition anymore. He was a guest referee for one of my matches in Great North Wrestling, but I do think I was actually having WWE tryouts around 2004, 2005, 2006, back when they put Hide and Right with Animal. I think I would have been a much better partner for Animal than Hide and Right because I have a mean streak in me. I'm more reliable. And yeah, Hide and Right ended up being really flaky and that angle went nowhere. So I think as a huge Road Warriors fan, that would have been a great partnership. Other than that, there's no, like, I'm retired now. So I couldn't tell you anyone from today I'd want to be partners with because I don't think about wrestling anymore myself. I'm happy doing interviews. I might do a couple more fights in my life, either MMA or kickboxing, because I wasn't really satisfied with the fights I did have. So I could see myself doing a few more of those, but I don't see myself pro wrestling unless a major company wants to literally give me hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I'm really happy doing what I'm doing. Gordo, Scarface, football, wrestling, and all combat sports are stupid and dangerous, but fun to watch. I don't know if they're stupid. There's benefits to them all. But wrestling, I don't know, professional wrestling, it's not that dangerous, really. It depends what kind of style you are. There's some wrestlers that do, like Joey Ryan. He's never been in a dangerous match that I know of. He just does comedy. A wrestler like me that is very hard hitting and realistic, yeah, that's dangerous. A guy like Davey Boy Smith Jr., I mean, he's doing a very hard hitting style too. But in wrestling, you can mitigate your dangers. You don't have to take chair shots to the head. You don't have to take crazy bumps like Mick Foley did, or like I've done at some points in my career. You could be more safe in the ring if you want. It's up to you. Unless you're making huge money working for a major company and to keep your job, you got to do what the company asks. Another question for Dr. Tom. Al wants me to ask Dr. Tom what made Eric Embry so over with the Dallas fans. A guy who wound up living in the sportatorium because he had no place to live. I think Eric Embry was booking Dallas, wasn't he? So he probably made himself the top babyface. Robert is asking me, was the Leaping Lanny video a work? I did a whole video on it. I've done videos on all my incident videos. Search on here, Hannibal shoots on Lanny Poffo incident. Peter C., just a quick question. What about Carrie Von Erich's daughter, Lacey Von Erich? I was actually thinking about her earlier today, coincidentally. I was actually thinking that same question. I should try and get a shoot interview with her. And Pete asked me that. I'm going to work on it. I don't know how to contact her, but I would like to interview her, yes. Ronnie Nader, damn it. This just updated and I missed your question. City of Roses 79 says Joey Ryan used to be a serious wrestler. I've never seen that. It's possible, though. The only thing I've seen of Joey Ryan are all the Twitter clips of him doing stuff that really belongs in softcore porns. But obviously, there's a minority of fans out there that like seeing that. And if he can make a living at it, good for him. But I don't think it's good for the business overall. It doesn't help the business that kind of stuff is going on, or these magical bomb matches or these social distancing matches. They just make wrestling look stupid. That video clip from how stupid it looks and people looking at it, laughing about how stupid it is, it might get hits for that, but I don't think it's going to breed new wrestling fans. Dave shows his good jobber interview would be a wrestler named Van Horum. Justin Allard says hello. These keep updating. It's hard to follow. Alan Kesselman says no interest in Joey Ryan. Patrick Rowe says he worked tugboat in Louisiana, and supposedly Ernie the Cat Lad's son worked there. Would I have interviewed Benoit if he hadn't done those horrible things? Probably. I don't know how great of an interview he would have been, though. His son was going to do an interview with me, but flaked out on it twice. So I gave up on his son. I lost respect for his son for doing that, because it's like, don't agree to do an interview with me and then just completely flake out on it. At least tell me so I don't waste my day planning to do an interview. But I've heard Benoit's son complain that WWE isn't interested in him. Well, he hasn't had one match to my knowledge, and he's just a skinny looking kid. So why should the WWE be interested in him if he doesn't even have a match and he doesn't even look like he works out? So good luck to him, honestly, from the bottom of my heart. Good luck to him. He'll probably end up in AEW. He's probably under some kind of secret contract there now. But, out of respect for your fellow wrestlers, and he did say he watched my channel. So I don't know why he would say do an interview with me and then flake out. So lost respect for him over that. Ty Birch, my favorite NHL team is the Montreal Canadiens. Why don't I like the Ottawa Senators? Because they're never going to win the Stanley Cup. And back in 2007, when they almost won, they came very close to winning the Stanley Cup. I was working in the bars during that series, and there were so many problems because people were starting to get drunk at like 4 p.m. leading up to the games. There was just huge problems for every game of those playoffs. And like, I was dealing with getting into legitimate fights every night over the over drinking that people were doing. And then I believe the Senators blew it in like Game 7. Tampa won. So, yeah, I never forgave the Senators for that. I did do security for them for many years. William Hamby, what UFO event interests me the most? Well, the Pentagon and U.S. Department of Defense coming out and saying that UFOs exist, I would call that the event that interests me the most because disclosure is here. It's happening. There's so much being disclosed right now. If you actually look for it, it's unbelievable. And it's a little concerning that the Department of Defense and the U.S. Navy admits that these objects are in our skies, technologically more advanced than anything we have, and there's nothing we can do about it. We supposedly, from what they're telling us, we don't know why we're here, and we don't know why they're here, sorry, and we don't know what they want, and there's nothing we can do to stop them. That's a little concerning. The JMC, is Daniel Puder as lame as he seems? I personally like Daniel Puder, and he's an 8-0 MMA fighter. You guys, some people will criticize Puder, but to be an 8-0 fighter, you got to be a decent fighter, even if you're going in there against lesser fighters. I don't know the quality of all of his opponents. I do understand he wrestled in fought in Strikeforce when Scott Coker, who owns Bellator now, was running it. So anyone that's 8-0 in MMA, anyone can knock anyone out on any given day. So to be an undefeated MMA fighter, to me, that's impressive to me. And basically, Kurt Angle was also chicken of him and politicked to get him fired from WWE. So I don't know. I personally don't know if Daniel Puder would have been a megastar, but I do believe they should have at least had that match with Puder and Kurt Angle. Even if they were just going to put Angle over, Puder was popular enough that he won Tough Enough. And Tough Enough was a fan vote. It was voted by the fans, yet they brought him in as a heel, even though he's popular enough to win Tough Enough. And then they did nothing with him, just jobbed him out in the Royal Rumble. So I think that was a complete waste of the $250,000 that they paid him, and a huge waste of all the TV time of Tough Enough, because the whole point of Tough Enough, get the winner over, and then you're just going to fire the winner. I don't know. Tough Enough, I guess John Morrison is the most successful winner. I applied for the same Tough Enough that John Morrison won back in 2002, I think it was. It was Tough Enough 3. I was at the same tryout in Colorado that John Morrison was at, and we were two of the only wrestlers that had experience at that tryout. And I remember talking to him that day, and he was very cool. He looked totally different then. He had short hair. I wish I had made that. I think my personality didn't show enough for the MTV producers. That might be why they didn't select me for that. And then I applied for the 2014 one. That my application video, got over 100,000 views, which was one of the highest application viewed videos. They even used me on one of the SmackDown Tough Enough previews, but they never selected me. And the guy that won it was fired within a year. So that was funny. I'll only answer a couple more because we're over an hour here. Big Brother Thunder, am I a Nick Aldis fan? No, I'm not a Nick Aldis fan. If you look at the NWA's views the past 30 days, I'm pretty sure it's 2 million or under, because I looked at it earlier today. Mine are over 10 million. Billy Corgan has thrown huge money at the NWA. It's going nowhere. They did a combined show with Ring of Honor in Baltimore that was free in a small arena, and the free show that Nick Aldis was on was only at 60% capacity in a major market like Baltimore that's historically a great wrestling market. So Nick Aldis might be actually, Kevin Owens might be the most overrated in WWE. Nick Aldis is probably the most overrated wrestler in the world today. One more question. What am I drinking? Water. And to answer that guy's question, Maliface is all this is a jabroni. We'll end it at that. Follow us on Instagram, at Twitter, at the Hannibal TV. I'll do another one of these planned live Q&As in the future. I know the UK fans wanted to get their questions in, and this is really late for them.